Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends. Welcome to the opening of the conference Changing Values, a conference that we, the Architekturzentrum Wien, organized together with our partners at the Vienna Biennale, the MAC, the Slovak Design Center, and the Kunsthalle Wien. Special welcome to His Excellency, the Ambassador of Pakistan. Thanks a lot for coming. We are very happy that you are here. And, of course, his wife. A particular warm welcome to all speakers who come from many disciplines, from architecture, art, design, business, and philosophy. This transdisciplinary approach makes the Vienna Biennale so special. Together, we will search for strategies for alternative ecological and economic approaches, and very important for the interdependencies of the two. We will explore ethical conditions of production, ecological justice, and human dignity in the 21st century. We are opening the conference today with two brilliant key speakers from two rather different disciplines. Both of them are absolute pioneers in their fields. Yasmeen Lari is an architect based in Pakistan who sets new standards for low cost, zero carbon, and zero waste projects. Spiekermann-Hoff is professor at the University of Economy and Business and a critical thinker who is pioneering ethics for the digital realm. Both of them will be introduced to you shortly. About tonight's schedule. We will have two keynote lectures moderated by Christoph Thun-Hohenstein and myself. Each lecture will be followed by a very short Q&A with the moderator. And then later on, after both lectures, there will be a panel discussion during which you will also be invited to come forward with your questions. Tomorrow, Saturday, we will start at 11 a.m., also here in this lecture hall. We will start with the panel Valuable Data. It will shed a light on the most urgent questions that arise regarding to handling data, especially big data. The panel will be chaired by Vanessa Joyn-Müller from the Kunsthalle Wien, and the speakers will be Paul Feigelfeld, Peter Mortenböck, Helge Mooshammer, and Katja Schechtner. In the afternoon, then, we will continue with a panel on innovative materials. It will debate which material innovations are needed for socially and ecologically sustainable development. This panel will be chaired by Mária Rišková from the Slovak Design Center. The speakers will be Ena-Lore Fritschi, Thomas Draxler, Sital Solansky, and Lilo Fivek. The final panel of our conference, Changing Value, will be chaired by Christoph Thun-Hohenstein. It will deal with transformation design, how to design the transformation from the current state into the desired state. The speakers will be Harald Gründel, Nikolaus Hirsch, Anab Jain, and Johannes Strohmeier. In the view of the state of our planet, in our current exhibition next door, Critical Care, we are even talking about a broken planet. There is an urgent need for action. Good architecture should save lives and the planet, says our key speaker, Yasmeen Lari. How will architects, artists, and designers contribute to both a dignified life for all humans and the survival of this planet? I'm looking forward to an intensive debate on these issues and many more, and will now hand over to Christoph Thun-Hohenstein, Director General of the MAC and Head of the Vienna Biennale.
Okay, good evening. Thank you so much, Angelika, for your introductory remarks. And I would like to echo the warm welcome you have extended to the distinguished ambassador and his wife, to our keynote speakers tonight, to all the panelists present here and many other distinguished guests. Thank you for coming. Also from my side, we are looking forward to the contributions and also to the discussions. Can you hear me, by the way? Yes? Okay. As Angelika mentioned, I have a double hat, invisible. On the one hand, I'm head of the Vienna Biennale, and on the other hand, of course, also director of the MAG. And this year's Vienna Biennale for Change is about brave new virtues. You could also say values, and there's a difference between the two. If you read Sarah Spiekermann's book, Digitale Ethik, you will find the difference explained. And it's about shaping our digital world. And you know, values and virtues are always important for each society. But they're particularly important when you happen to live in a new modernity. You know my conviction that we currently live in a new modernity. I call it digital modernity because the digital is the driver of most of the developments, including bioengineering. And therefore, I think we should also confront our current times in this mood. Even when getting up in the morning, I always think, I live in a new modernity. What does it mean? I have to contribute to the shaping of that modernity. And this is very important in the sense that business as usual is out. Time is too precious to have business as usual. And so when you talk about values and virtues in a new modernity, which is a digital modernity but should become an ecological social modernity, then of course you have to reflect on values. That's the point of departure, to get it right. Everywhere in the global north, in the global south. And when you talk about values, you also have to bear in mind it's about two major developments. One is to define the goals. For instance, I give you one that's very obvious. We want fossil-free energy. So this is a clear goal. So one thing is we have this idea, we want to live in a world without fossil energy. But on the other hand, the question is, how do you get there? So it's very important on the one hand to clarify the goals, and on the other hand to also think about how to get there from now where we are to the desired state. And in that sense, it's a double task. There are lots of other perspectives, of course, and you will be enlightened on that, I'm sure, later on. But that is key. And so this conference is also, of course, a core component of the Vienna Biennale for Change 2019. And we are very happy, all the institutions have been mentioned, but we are very happy this is taking place also in the framework of an INTERREG, EU INTERREG project, Slovakia-Austria. And I'm a huge fan of the European Union, in spite of not always being happy about current developments, but we can make it, get a better European Union. We have again the chance to do so with a new commission, so we'll see how that works out. And our task as institutions here, but also as civil societies, to come up with lots of bright ideas. And maybe one final point in this brief introduction. When we talk about, I always talk about the magic 3 challenges for the future. On the one hand, has been mentioned already, climate change. I call it climate care. Care has been mentioned also in terms of critical care here. And other environment problems. The other one is digitalization in all its aspects, of course. And the third one is what I call social sustainability, the goal of social sustainability, meaning social inclusion, a reduction of social inequality, migration, and so on and so forth. And these 3 major challenges are, of course, all connected, negatively and positively. And we have to work on that. And we have to do it in a holistic manner. But when we are visionary, and I discussed it yesterday with Harald Welzer, when we are visionary, we have to make a distinction. We have to think holistically, but not necessarily develop a comprehensive vision that doesn't allow for any other vision. So it's on the one hand a lot of small steps that are needed by each and everyone, but on the other hand also, of course, let's say, the right incentives, tax incentives, and many other initiatives. So it's a mixture of bottom-up and top-down. I call it bottom-top. And we need that mixture, but we should not mix it up with a comprehensive, exclusive, visionary view of the future. And that's always very important to bear in mind. So in that spirit, thank you for your interest. I'm looking forward to the two keynotes tonight and to an interesting discussion. Thank you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, dear guests, dear friends. I would like to triple echo the welcome. Keynote speakers, of course, we are all very looking forward to tonight lectures, to tonight discussion. Also speakers of tomorrow panels, and of course all guests, visitors. Without you, it would have no sense to just meet and talk without all of you, without your presence. During opening of Vienna Biennale for Change, I addressed shortly topic of change, that for Slovakia, our country, it is very important notion. It is something, the reality in which we are living, to which we very often are somehow coming back. Of course, I'm talking about this changes in '89, which happened 30 years ago. But I also addressed that now I have a feeling that the change is really in something else, that now it's not about national countries, it's not about borders anymore, but we all countries have to come together and achieve a lot of changes and really great changes together. Today, I would like to address another keyword of Vienna Biennale, which is value. I am very happy that together with colleagues and that Christoph, as a very known visionary, chose the word and the notion of values for this year Biennale, and that we have it also here in the conference, because sometimes these simple notions, simple words are somehow abandoned. We think that it's already nothing what we can discuss, but I think that these notions which were discussed before, we have to bring them back and talk about them in contemporary world. So I'm very happy that also we are part of all this happening of Vienna Biennale for Change, of this conference, and somehow maybe we add to the voice of region, if I can say, because our presence, our neighborhood really asks for it, to come together more often and to do together things which are very important for our present and future. So thank you very much, and I'm looking forward to our keynote speakers of tonight. Thank you.
It's now my pleasure to introduce our first keynote speaker, Yasmeen Lari. Yasmeen Lari is one of the most influential architects in Pakistan and far beyond. She graduated from Oxford School of Architecture and was elected to the Royal Institute of British Architects in 1969. She has built several landmark buildings in Pakistan, such as the PSO House or the Emro Bank in Karachi. She is considered among the pioneers of brutalistic architecture, and her work was shown in major exhibitions on brutalism, also here at the Architekturzentrum Wien. Lari was elected president of the Institute of Architects Pakistan in 1978 and was the first chairperson of Pakistan Council of Architects and Town Planners. In 1980, and that will be important also in her lecture, she founded the Heritage Foundation of Pakistan together with her husband, Suhail Zahir Lari, who is a renowned historian. When a terrible earthquake shook Pakistan in 2005, this marked a turning point in her architectural career. As she told me again today, she was trained to be a star architect, designing for the 1%. Since 2005, she has taken a completely different path. Now her central values are low cost, zero carbon, zero waste. This work resulted in more than 40,000 green shelters and many other green infrastructures, which provide a radical alternative to the global aid industry. In recognition of her services towards architecture, heritage, and humanitarian assistance, the President of Pakistan has awarded her the Star of Distinction and the Crescent of Distinction recently. In 2016, from Japan, she has received the highly acclaimed Fukuoka Prize for Asian Art and Culture, and in 2018, the World Habitat Award. She is UNESCO consultant and has been published among the 60 women who have contributed the most towards UNESCO objectives. She is the author of several books and has lectured widely. Her works have been exhibited in the first Chicago Architectural Biennial and are on display in RIBA's permanent collection. And of course, you can find her very recent work in our exhibition Critical Care, Architecture for a Broken Planet, next door, which I curated together with Elke Krasny, who is also here tonight. And you can find her work, her recent work in this book, which we did with the exhibition published by MIT Press, Critical Care, Architecture and Urbanism for a Broken Planet. So everyone who wants to have a look later on, please come forward. As curators, we have learned so much from her work. To name but a few. How can we radically rethink what green architecture means? How can we implement the right to housing and livelihood for all? And how can we combine ecological with economic issues? I'm extremely happy and honored that she is sharing her knowledge with us tonight. And please give a warm welcome to Yasmeen Lari.
Thank you so much, Angelika. Excellencies, distinguished organizers of this conference, and of course, Vienna Biennale, and distinguished speakers and panelists, also Angelika and Elke, who have written this amazing book and collected so much stuff from all around the world. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum. It is a great honor and privilege for me to be part of this important discourse, which aims to prevent the impairment that the planet is facing today. Whether belonging to the North or the South, the first or the third world, as we know, actions taken unthinkingly can cause grievous harm at a global level today. The dialogue is significant in that it aligns with the recent movement for transition design in the West and my own Barefoot model, all aimed at change over to more sustainable future lifestyles for humankind. So as you can see, the title is Barefoot, a Social Architecture for Social and Ecological Justice. It's about changing values, of course, and for your conference. So a little bit about Heritage Foundation of Pakistan. So on the left, so it's a not-for-profit social and cultural entrepreneur organization established in 1980 for safeguarding Pakistan's cultural heritage. And since 2005, it provides humanitarian assistance by linking heritage with pre- and post-disaster development. So you see on this left is about heritage management, and it's this beautiful Timurid tomb of 16th century, which is at Makli World Heritage Site that you must all come and visit. And it has some beautiful scintillating ceramics. And today when Angelika took me to this restaurant where the beautiful Turkish tiles are there, it reminded me very much of what the legacy that we also have. So you have to come to Pakistan to view all that. And we have conserved this particular monument at the Makli World Heritage Site. And Makli itself is the largest Muslim necropolis in the world today. So it is really something worth seeing. And on the right is this about our humanitarian assistance and reconstructed earth masonry structure after floods, decorated by the rural housewife. This is where the innate creativity of the local people can emerge. So basically incorporating spirit of volunteerism and commitment to causes, and we've got a few awards that show that probably our work is worthwhile. So working in the two fields has allowed me to seek inspiration from both cultural heritage and vernacular techniques for working out low-cost methodologies that resonate with marginalized communities' aspirations. Now, a little bit of introduction about Pakistan's cultural heritage, which is very diverse. I say it because most of the countries you have a certain kind of legacy which is probably very similar and it's gone through many years. But with us, we have just so many different kinds of legacies. So I thought I'll just bring you a list very quickly. The tangible heritage is about Bronze Age Mohenjo-Daro and Mehergarh. There's Hindu, Buddhist, and Gandhara remains. There's the Sultanate period monuments. There's Mughal palaces, forts, and paradisal gardens, and also the British colonial shared heritage, which really abounds in all our urban centers. And then there's the intangible heritage, which again is extremely important for us, which is the Sufi traditions and spiritualism. There's folklore, there's folk traditions, oral history, and diverse crafts. It is ironic that even though belonging to the third world, only after I had brought to a close my career as a star architect of 36 years, from 2005, recurring disasters in Pakistan forced my attention towards the vast marginalized sections of my country. As a practicing architect, barring a few projects, I had indulged in an extravagant, egotistic journey, which focused on serving the elite 1% of my country. As much of Pakistan is situated on seismic fault lines and in the path of melting glaciers, during the last decade and a half, we have undergone major calamities of earthquakes and floods on a regular basis, almost every year, making evident the dangers of global warming and climate change along with the speedy depletion of the planet's resources. So just to tell you something about the climate change that's happening, you can see the list. 2005, which is a major disaster, 80,000 lives lost, and something like 400,000 families were displaced, and they had to be rehabilitated. But again, countrywide floods and constant floods, and then 2013 we had earthquake, then floods, then again 2015 earthquake and floods in another province of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, and again just very recently flash floods in Sindh. And this is what we see constantly happening and which we are confronted with. But I think the whole world is now facing that kind of disasters, and we need to be really thinking about that issue. The interaction with poverty-stricken, vulnerable populations forced me to dispense with my hugely inflated ego, obligating me to swallow the bitter pill of humility by sitting at the threshold of the poor, exploring their age-old practices, learning from Pakistan's pre-industrial vernacular heritage. I understood that design is not a standalone activity. It must be underpinned by considerations of social impact and ecological sustainability. Over the last years, in my struggle to articulate a people's humanistic architecture as part of rights-based development, incorporating attributes of social and ecological justice, it is the stratagem that I call barefoot social architecture, or BASA, that has shaped the ecology of my work. Now, BASA is akin to social engineering for bringing about social change, incorporating environmental, cultural, and technical dimensions, resulting in transformation of mindset among who political philosopher Frantz Fanon refers to as the wretched of the earth, from a cycle of dependency to a culture of pride and of self-reliance. The transition itself from recipients of aid to becoming implementers themselves fosters empowerment, which helps not only to attain primary human needs, but also emboldens to demand, as the former UN Secretary General Kofi Annan declared, justice as a right. On the one hand, BASA seeks to democratize architecture that provides people with well-being and self-esteem. On the other, its partiality for zero carbon footprint using ubiquitous earth, conservative magic lime, and renewable bamboo leads to what Angelika, Fitz, and L.K. Krasny refer to as critical care for the planet in their remarkable publication and the exhibition they have curated. So the people that I work with today live below the poverty line and mostly walk barefoot. While they suffer from lack of opportunities, economist Max Need points out, they actually suffer from not one, but from many poverties. These could be unmet primary human needs of shelter, water, sanitation, and cooking stoves. Now, cooking stoves don't normally occur, but I think the way women have to go through the pain of cooking on these open stoves, they have to be right on the top of the list of any humanitarian work, I believe. And so the poor health and illiteracy, tyranny and violence, with most women having to undergo high infant mortality, marginalization, and oppression. It is pertinent that to social economist Naila Kabir, and I quote, gender-related inequalities often intensify effects of poverty, unquote. UNCTAD, which is the UN Conference on Trade and Development, estimates that an investment of 3.3 to 4.5 trillion US dollars is needed annually for developing countries to achieve these sustainable development goals for social, environmental, and economic development, with expected annual shortfall of about 2.6 trillion US dollars. So the developing countries will never actually be able to then make up. So far, the humanitarian funding landscape has been largely dominated by classical, international, or Western charity syndicates, as well as UN-backed, what is called a cluster or a siloed system, with the intention of providing good. They have doled out vast amounts to recipients, considering them helpless victims. This is how they treat them, as if they can't do anything themselves. Due to the inherent inefficiency in the system, high structural and management costs, constrained outreach, insensitivity to local cultural norms, and inability to treat sufferers as equal partners, the goal of sustainability will continue to be unattainable. So it is, in my view, sustainability is achievable only through the implementation of a counter-transformational strategy which takes advantage of the potential of those suffering from multiple poverties. Unless you treat them as equal partners, allow them to play their own role, we'll never be able to catch up. By enabling a more inclusive discourse and a paradigm for sharing local knowledge and the range of untapped resources, which, as economist Rachel Glenister points out, comprise human, financial, social, and physical, along with cultural reserves, thus transforming daunting adversities into opportunities for sustainable development. So let's look at the next slide now. So what is this barefoot social architecture? And first, maximizing the potential of barefoot ecosystem. Secondly, zero carbon humanistic architecture, fostering pride, dignity, and well-being. Third, delivery of unmet needs, which is a barefoot incubator for social good and environmental sustainability. And fourth is non-engineered structures for shrinking the ecological footprint. These are the four issues that I feel are important, and we have to look at them very carefully to see how we can achieve the results. So here is a slide that shows the work that we have so far done between really 2011 to 2018, where something like 0.84 million lives have been impacted. So with the construction of something like now, I think it's about 43,000 housing units that you see. How shall I do it now? Yeah, I think I have got here. These are the shelter, the kind of shelter. One room safe shelter is all that's needed, which is made out of mud and lime and bamboo. And then we need some water. So the raised hand pumps, again, something like 30,000 people. The Chula, which is now the World Habitat Award winner, is like, something like 60,000 of them have been built. And if you see the cost, they're very, very low. And similarly, plantation and community forest, and of course, sanitation and toilets and so on. And we managed to really try to target many of the sustainable development goals. So now, the first part of the segment of barefoot social architecture, maximizing the potential of barefoot ecosystem. Now, I would like to put it to you that the deprivations mentioned above are part of a disparate, parallel world of a latent barefoot ecosystem. Because there are so many poor people, and somehow we don't look at them. We don't realize there's a whole life out there which can be actually transformed if you were to take them seriously. The prospects of which have been overlooked by economists and politicians alike, the strengths that exist there. Working with marginalized communities in the last years has allowed me to adopt a bottoms-up approach that was mentioned by the director also, encouraging efficient use of funds and resources, rights-based development, knowledge sharing through training and guidance for cost-effective output. Now this in turn, just put my glasses on. This in turn has stimulated the Barefoot ecosystem in order to foster a life of reasonable fulfillment through an enabling process of serving and sharing with other disadvantaged populations. So what they do, they share with the others so that everybody starts having a better quality of life. And so let's look at the Barefoot ecosystem. Okay, this consists of the Barefoot Economy, transactions by low-income and marginalized groups. Secondly, the Barefoot market, untapped market for services and products that exist due to the deprived state of marginalized communities. Thirdly, the Barefoot enterprises, services and products for basic unmet needs. For example, safe shelter, sanitation, water, clean stoves that give you a kind of a holistic model. Fourth, Barefoot entrepreneurs, persons trained to serve impoverished communities by charging a small fee. Barefoot skills, there's again non or semi-literate people, and then Barefoot products. So these are some of the things that make up the Barefoot ecosystem that I think can be maximized and can be exploited very well. So now, just to tell you, show you how we feel, the ecosystem is in the middle, as you can see, and then we have the economy, the markets, and so on and so on. So now if you talk of the Barefoot economy, we know that the prevalent highly consumptive market economy and market-intensive societies pursuing material gains have in any case not benefit the underprivileged. Since as Carnegie Mellon's professor Irwin points out, they are only motivated, and I quote, motivated by the desire for profit and economic growth rather than human fulfillment, unquote. Instead, a Barefoot economy promotes humanitarian kind of development and itself being regenerated by low-cost products that weave nature with age-old vernacular traditions or techniques, contributing to more equitable lifestyle. The transactions are based on procurement of essential unmet needs using judicious use of sustainable materials and fashioned by low-income, marginalized workers that contribute to improved quality of life for the other disadvantaged. So the poor are working for the other poor, rather than the poor working for the rich. And that's where I think the difference is, and that's what we need to do. We know that Barefoot market is non-existent in the eyes of most finance specialists. However, due to poor governance and corruption in many developing countries, a vast variety of goods are required in order to make up for the physical and social infrastructure that does not exist. It is akin to a kind of a humanitarian marketplace to respond to many vulnerabilities faced by the poor. For example, in my own country, there's a ready market for millions of units to gratify the primary human needs alone, as safe shelter, toilets, and I recently built eco-toilets, water pumps, and fuel-efficient stoves. These are all there, and by using low-cost, sustainable materials, a host of downstream products can also be promoted. The Barefoot market is underpinned by Barefoot enterprises and Barefoot entrepreneurs that are really non-literate people and were once largely unskilled. These micro-ventures are designed to help guide the process of safe construction and many inexpensive organic products. And that's how you make them very inexpensive also, because they are organic and you use the materials that are around you. So it is the Barefoot entrepreneur, or Bs as I call them, that are likely to become millionaires, who by sharing their knowledge and expertise are able to foster social good and well-being for the underprivileged. Now, by exploiting the market for stoves, which is the Pakistan Chula, which has got the award, one B couple, by charging rupees 200 or just 1.14 euro, I think it comes to, has helped build something like 30,000 out of the 60,000 that we've got built. Earning rupees 125,000 rupees a month, which is about 714 euros. It may not sound much to you, but for Pakistan, it's a great deal of money. And per month, or over 25 times what they earned before, which is only about 28 euros a month. So this is the order of the market that exists if we were just to target the poor. And if we can have them, the products have to be low cost, good quality, and sustainable. So in addition, the self-built, clean, fuel-efficient, award-winning Earthen Pakistan Chula has helped transform the lives of thousands of downtrodden women, bringing dignity and respect in their lives. So when we do something, it's not only just as a structure, but how it's transforming society itself. And that, I think, for architects is something that's very important to really realize, because they can be instrumental for societal change. Similarly, other barefoot entrepreneurs are also set to earn enormous incomes through sustainable micro-enterprises, which are all social enterprises. Now, the barefoot skills are imparted to the unskilled and the non-literate for a host of low-cost products for income generation, trainings for safe construction, bamboo and earth materials, terracotta and glazed tiles provide these products and services for unmet needs, because there's so many unmet needs of the poor that are normally not taken care of. Now, barefoot products are based on locally sourced eco-materials in order to make them affordable that contribute to improved quality of life. Now, the products consist of sun-dried brick or lime brick. I don't know anybody who knows that lime can be used very effectively because we are so used to using cement. Then prefab thatched panels, because the roofs can be made of those and they are very solid and sturdy. And bamboo doors and windows to household items such as terracotta and glazed ceramic tiles, to organic soap and recycled briquettes of cow dung and sawdust. And compost from waste from the eco toilets, because the solid can be easily made into compost. We don't have to waste anything. And this is to name a few. Now, with their focus on fulfilling societal primary needs, their products and services find a ready market in surrounding marginalized communities. We don't have to go to the rich to market the products. There's all the stuff that is made is already marketable elsewhere around, because there's such a great need for those things. So now I come to the second part of my talk, which is the zero carbon humanistic architecture, fostering pride, dignity, and well-being. Now, in my present work, I follow two gurus, and I'll tell you who they are. First is the lime guru, and you must know him. It's Marcus Vitruvius, first BC Roman architect, author of treatise De Architectura, or 10 books of architecture. Those who are here as architects must have gone through them, so you know all about it. So lime guru Vitruvius, I am bound by his 4 elements of air, water, earth, and fire as of the limits of architecture. And in his extensive treatise, he defines all bodies as being composed of 4 elements, and I quote, "Those with larger portion of air are soft, of water are tough from moisture, of earth hard, and of fire more brittle," unquote. And to me, the alchemy of natural elements addresses the bounds of sustainability, spanning the spheres of economic, social, moral, and cultural aspects. I believe that the use of these elements leads us to the confines of democratic norms and behavior. And this is something that we should be looking at very carefully. And the second one is Hassan Fateh, the earth guru. I don't know how many of you have heard of Hassan Fateh. Anybody? Great Egyptian architect who wrote a book on architecture for the poor, who did work in earth, basically 20th century, 1930s, and so on. Anyhow, so, and as Hassan Bey would have it, I'm conscious at all times of obligation to be close to nature and to the people, and to traverse a path which would unleash the creativity of the common folk using their intangible reserves of ancient wisdom. Sometimes we forget that common people that we consider common have actually enough stores of wisdom that we might well be thinking about. And immersed as they are in their folklore, oral histories, and craft traditions, the so-called vernacular expression. I always feel that some of us who feel that we are very highly educated, we look down upon what comes from the rural areas or from vernacular traditions. And I think the time has come for us to all look at it, because that is where sustainability lies, actually. So, and then, there's myself, low carbon footprint advocate. And as far as my work is concerned, I consider myself an advocate of earth, lime, and bamboo. That's the only three materials I use now. I use thatch and I use stone also, but primarily these are the three materials. No cement whatsoever. These are most sustainable materials, I believe, which are the only materials that I feel are important for the work that I do today. So as you might be aware, clay does not have to be burnt in fire to attain strength. I don't know how many of you have worked with clay or earth. Anybody? You have to come to Pakistan to come and use it, I think. So it's a combination of earth, water, and sunlight. It can be a very strong material. It should not be. We don't actually use any burnt brick at all because it has lots of fumes and it's not good for the environment. So they provide a building material of great value. The ever-present earth is most freely available and one that is most used around the world by the poor. It's never used by the rich or the 1% of the people, but always by the poor. The second material is lime. It is hewn as a rock, which the alchemy of fire transforms into an unparalleled force that has provided strength to Roman aqueducts. I don't know whether you know that. And also to Timurid forts and Mughal forts. We made them very, very strong. Once common earth and lime are mixed together, water provides a strength that cannot be surpassed even by any other material, and certainly not by Portland cement. So I don't know whether anybody has used lime here at all, ever, or heard of it, because I think maybe time has come for us to look at it. It is definitely a material that is a very good alternative to cement. And until cement was actually made, the Portland cement, it was lime that was used. So it's not that far away. I mean, it was only, last century, basically, when cement was popularized. Now, lime also absorbs carbon from the air through what is known as the lime cycle, comprising sequence of change in the form of from burning to slaking and also then hardening, and then going back to the original carbonate form. Now, the third material that I use, of course, is bamboo. Again, anybody has used bamboo at all or not? Maybe it's time has come for us to look at it very seriously. So this amazing product is nurtured by soil and water and has incomparable characteristics. Technically a grass, it provides a crop every 2 or 3 years, and due to the resilience and ease of use, being among the largest renewable sources, it is the mainstay of my seismic and flood-proof structures. And I'll show you some of them to see how they survive these calamities. So the next slides show the structures that have been built using these materials, which also draw upon vernacular traditions in Pakistan. So this is, I wanted to show you this because this particular one is a survivor of the great earthquake of 2005, and you can see how the cross bracing has been done in this, which is really, did not allow it to collapse. So, and this is how I use it. I've borrowed the basic technique, but translated that into use of bamboo. So we don't use any wood at all, but we have the same strength that we found in the vernacular construction. And then there's this other one that I want to show you, which is really a slide from after 2010 floods, where you see this very nice conical form on the left, and it's all mud structures, and they survived. And so we've taken that conical form and used it in building after floods in other areas, and you can see the conical roof is something that is really something very interesting to use, and it's very cool inside there. So this is how you provide interventions or technical interventions, how to make the original vernacular kind of forms and techniques into something that can be made very safe in terms of disasters, whether earthquake or whether, whether floods. So, and also because it provides really comfortable microclimate due to the way that they are constructed. So it's something really interesting. So now I'll show you another, this is a bamboo structure, which has been, the slide has been, actually this has been done by Al Jazeera, who did a documentary on my work. Oh, thank you, that's great. This is all bamboo. There's nothing else that's been used in this. And it's a women's center. We built quite a few of them, actually, and in 2011. And there have been several floods after that. And they've all survived. And nothing has happened to them. So I wanted to show you how these materials actually act during a disaster. And it can take a huge amount of water. So, and then I just wanted to show you this slide, how we're trying to mainstream this whole zero carbon structures in different areas. On the top is in Upper Sindh, it's a park on which we put this up, and we actually conducted a lot of trainings there. And below is a whole eco village that was actually, built with using the same materials. So considering the expected shortfall in funding for achieving sustainable development goals, developing countries will continue to be left behind unless there's a sustained effort for training the poor for the benefit of the other poor. So in order to develop barefoot enterprises for low-cost services and products, along with accessing follow-up humanitarian aid funding, the Barefoot Incubator has been established, which focuses on fulfilling unmet needs of the vast majority living below the poverty line. So now, so this was, this is the Barefoot Incubator that we started, and since last 2 years, we've been actually training people through this particular process. You must know about the incubator, which is normally used for IT and other kind of, and we have the graphics and the IT person here, the speaker will be talking about the digital elements. And there, of course, so much money is put in to train people and then also to get them more work and carry on developing. So I thought, if they can do it, why can't we do as a Barefoot Incubator? So that's how this has come about. So the incubator has been set up to conduct workshops for 30 selected incubatees per session for 8 services or products, with a ratio of 60% women and 5% disabled, belonging to villages which have the greatest outreach among marginalized communities. Now, the 6-day workshops focusing on different specifications or specializations are conducted by certified master artisans. 2 more 2-day follow-up workshops are designed at 3- and 6-month interval, and then mentoring and outreach assistance throughout the year provides hand-holding. So now follow-up grant funding is also required for this, and this is the kind of structure. I don't know if you can read it or not, but maybe you can get a gist of what's going on. I'm conscious I may run over time, so I will not go through into the details, but you can see on the right we have the villages that are producing specialized products which are all to do with unmet needs, and on the left we have this whole structure of it as to how we select and how we teach, and then how we have to get follow-up funding. Now, follow-up grant funding for 55,000 persons at 2.3 euros per beneficiary can provide basic human unmet needs by 30 startups at a meager incubator cost of 0.9 per beneficiary. So that's the order of money that we are talking of. On calculation, we find that the same 30 enterprises can scale up in the next 4 years to serve more than 300,000 beneficiaries. So you can see the cost gradually gets even minimized. And so let's see the next slide, which is to do with delivery of unmet needs. And the most critical unmet needs are the rights-based requirements of safe shelter, sanitation, water, and clean cooking stoves, along with other needs of food security through plantation, inexpensive natural soap for hygiene, natural fuel from sawdust waste and cow dung, fabrication of eco-building materials, and organic compost from kitchens and toilet waste. And this kind of shows you what we are doing, basically, the shelter and toilet and water pumps and stove and plantation, community forest, natural soap, natural kind of fuel, and materials for building, and then how products are made. And this is like bamboo product that the poor never had, like doors and windows. So you can see also from there how we basically train and they will carry on. So all the stuff that is being made is for the poor. We are not interested in the rich. And they are low cost enough that people can afford to buy them. So also over 200 persons have been trained earlier this year for 8 enterprises, or 25 persons each have established their startups for making barefoot products, are expected to rise above the poverty line within a year. They can all earn enough where they are right now below the poverty line. So Now we look at the impact. I don't know whether you can see this, but very quickly, the 30 people who are trained can, over time, 302,000 people can be impacted. And then the cost of enterprise, you can see, is extremely, extremely low. And we do have to get grant for humanitarian aid, which we are able to get. And that's how people can get this holistic development model of having the basic needs that can be put together. So now I just wanted to show you this is the campus where we are training everybody. The incubator is set up here, and it's got lots of area all around. And this is what we call a zero-carbon cultural center. It's a 4-acre residential campus, and this is where the training is done. This is, again, zero-carbon. It's only bamboo and nothing else, actually. And this is what it serves to train people in a big way. And next now, this is again, the kind of people who are being trained. You can see lots of women and also men, of course, and they're all learning to make various things. So you can see that it can be done. They are all ready to learn and to go forward and help others as well. So this is now the safe shelter, and basically it costs only 70 to 114 euros per unit. And the barefoot entrepreneur who teach them how to do these things charge 8.5 euros per family, which they are able to give. So they start earning money this way. And then this is the primary need of shared eco-toilets at 58 euros per unit. Again, barefoot entrepreneur provides guidance at 4 euros per household, because this toilet is shared by 2. And this is zero carbon as well. And then this is a raised hand pump, which during floods is not affected. And you can see the cost is only 88 euros per unit. And the barefoot entrepreneurs provide guidance, and 1.7 euros per family, because 5 families actually share this. And then clean food. So this is, on the left is what you see how women normally cook, which is most unhygienic and is a terrible plight for women. This is what I had designed. It is the stove is actually this part with a chimney, and we use these organic briquettes for fuel, and then the platform keeps them above any kind of filth around it, and also from any kind of floods. And then this is how they transform it. So this is their own innate creativity that comes through. So each one of these, of 60,000 that have been built, each one is different. Each one is a designer stove, because each one has been, it's women who've actually done it. So women are really the mainstay of all the work that I do. And so now I come to the fourth part. This is the last one. I hope I'm doing all right for time. Please tell me if I go over. Non-engineered structures for shrinking the ecological footprint. We've known what happens with the engineered structures. We know how much energy is used in them. And we've got to go in for non-engineered. And these have been tested, and I'll show you the testing that's been done, some through various earthquakes and floods, but also through a proper testing procedure. So what I want to put it to you is this really international aid culture needs revisiting. And I would really request all those people who are influential with either European Union or with the British aid giving or Scottish aid giving, or I don't know, there's so many, or UN system, please tell them it's not working what's being done. It's not, we don't need charity. So as I said, charity in good faith fosters dependency and robs the receiver of self-esteem. We've seen it since 2005. It's destroyed the kind of self-esteem of so many of our people. Second, promotion of alien imagery. A lot of times aid comes with designs that have already been done somewhere else. We had no relation to what's happening on the ground or what the cultural aspects are. And so mostly expensive materials. Sometimes they just cut a lot of trees to put up emergency housing. And it's not working. So it cannot be replicated by the poor, and culturally, environmentally, it's extremely damaging. And then a lack of proper knowledge and tools allows limited assistance to the needy. That's another major problem. And then women are invariably left behind. Either they're thought that women will not do anything, or people are afraid of them, or I don't know what. But women are never actually involved in any kind of work that goes on. And I think that is so wrong, because women are ready now to do things, even though however marginalized they might be. And we've seen this, how they come and they work. And then high administrative cost of disbursement of aid allows only a fraction to reach the households, right? So now, basically, high carbon emissions are inflicted on the world in the name of safe post-disaster reconstruction areas, where low ecological footprint was the norm, such as Pakistan's picturesque north, which has been ruined with proliferation of engineered cement concrete structures in the aftermath of 2005 earthquake, built with international aid and promoted as state policy. So we have to be really looking at all this very carefully, what we should accept, what we should do, and what we must not do. Next is, I thought just to put you, and I'm sure a lot of you know about this, the impact of building industry worldwide. And I'm sorry, the figures are a little bit old, but I think they're still very much relevant. 40% of world energy, 16% of world's water usage, 3 billion tons of raw material, 15 to 20% of waste stream is what architects and engineers and others who are building structures, this is what we're inflicting on the planet. And then you can see the energy requirements as to how high they are. And the time has come that we must rethink as to how these things should be done. And then you can see again the global carbon emissions, how much is added on. And then this is the kind of structure that is given to us by international aid agencies, which cost 600 to 800 euros. And the environmental impact assessment was done by Magnus Murray, who was an advisor to DFID, and he thinks that 100,000 shelters that were built with burnt brick, we would have been denuded of forest of something like 50,000 acres of forest would be gone. So this is the order of things, of damage that's being caused with good intention, with people wanting to help, but not knowing how they should do it. So the word has to go out, and that's why your exhibition and your book is so critical, to make an understanding that the time has come for all of us to think as to how we should be handling these situations. And then now this is the non-engineered sustainable construction, of which 40,000 have been built and in association with IOM. And this is the world's largest zero carbon footprint shelter program. No carbon emissions, no trees felled, 1750 villages covered, 300,000 persons housed. And the materials used are only locally sourced lime, low energy clay, and low energy lime and renewable bamboo. And then the cost is only, as you can see, 114 to 170 euros compared to 600 to 800 euros. So, and this is, I brought this because it's my prefab bamboo unit, and this slide shows how bamboo panels can be used. These are actually being sent to Malawi. The order has been placed where these panels will be sent out, and they will be putting them up for the poor there, and then more, I believe, is also in the pipeline. So far, a couple of thousand of these have been built and constructed and have withstood floods. So basically, they're panels that are joined together on the roof, and they can be sent anywhere, and they can be put together in this way. And then the same panels can be joined together further, and they make a larger room, which can be like a community center. And when the World Habitat wanted to help us, and they wanted to give us some funds, I said, okay, we'll build some training centers for you under the name of World Habitat. And so we designed this particular structure, which is, again, with a dome, but it's all bamboo. And then Interbau from England, from UK, and the Prince Charles's, organizations wanted to help us in Muckley, and so we said, okay, we'll put up an Interbau center, and you join up, and this is what it becomes. So it is very simple and easy to do these things. And the next one I want to show you is, will this work again? Sorry, would you like to do this? Thank you so much. So this is an earthquake-proof structure, which is entirely of lime concrete in the base, which has this lattice of bamboo built in certain levels, and then even the ring beam has bamboo reinforcement, and then you get a roof which is entirely bamboo. And so this is the way this particular one has been designed. And just completed, and we go to the next one. And the lattice goes on the outside and also inside, and that somehow really adds resilience to the structure. There's nothing but sun-dried brick and bamboo in this, and that's it. And lime, of course. So, and then let's go to the next one. We had to build it in Shangla, and the earthquake had happened there in 2015, so it had to be totally seismic proof. We had to prove that it was so. So we got this testing done at this very famous university in Karachi called NED University. And the 50% size model was actually tested on 7.3 Richter scale of Kobe earthquake. And you can see from 25% we went up to 100, then from 125 to 275, and there was hardly any impact on it. And then the Vice Chancellor said it's not possible, we've got to break it, so we went up to 670%. And we'll see what happens. So this is my last slide for you. And please, if you will. This is, keep in mind that this is several shocks have already been inflicted on us. This is after when it was 100% of Kobe earthquake. So it didn't do anything to it. It was just fine. So then I think this is about 275%. Here we didn't get any cracks. It still survived. And then now this is 670% of Kobe earthquake. So finally, they had to stop because it's going to impact the concrete buildings in the area. So, so this is how strong, bamboo and earth can be, and total life safety is assured. Everybody would be safe inside, even though the walls had buckled. But as you can see, the roof did not collapse. So. Basically low cost, zero carbon, zero waste, as Angelika said, for saving the planet and the destitute around the world. And Heritage Foundation's Barefoot Incubator for social good and environmental sustainability provides support for training and guidance for low cost green social enterprises. Thank you very much. Very kind.
Thank you, Yasmeen Lari, for an eye-opening keynote and reflecting a visionary and at the same time deeply humanistic attitude. And I think visionary and deeply humanistic are also characteristics I would like to mention here as regards our next keynote speaker, Sarah Spiekermann-Hoff. I will use the short form, Sarah Spiekermann, if that's okay. And she has, since 2009, been chairing the Institute for Information Systems and Society at the Vienna University of Economics and Business, the WU Vienna. She's a well-regarded scientist, author, speaker, and advisor on digital ethics. Of course, she has published several books, including this one, my revelation of this year's literature I did, which came out in spring, right? I really loved it. I will give you a quote at the end. But also a book called Ethical IT Innovation, a Value-Based System Design Approach in 2015. As well as Networks of Control in 2016. Sarah Spiekermann founded in the same year the Privacy and Sustainable Computing Lab at WU Vienna. She's published over 100 scientific articles on the social and ethical implications of computer systems and given more than 200 talks on her work. Very important also, she has co-authored US-EU privacy regulation and worked as an expert and advisor for companies and governmental institutions, including the EU Commission and the OECD. She has a blog, The Ethical Machine, at Austrian leading newspapers, The Standard, and is on the advisory board of the Austrian Digitalization Agency. What really makes her special, very special, I think, is this deeply humanistic approach and attitude. She's one of my hopes for us working also on a European model of digital modernity, including trustworthy AI, the right ethics, etc., etc. And I think a very short quote tells you what her attitude is. Progress requires wisdom and courage. Machines lack both. Sarah Spiekermann, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Yeah, I think the concerns and the questions I'm asking seem to be from a different world than the kind of world we have just heard about. I'm very impressed by the organizers that you're actually creating such an immense bridge, even though we are always told we are living in a global village, but obviously that may not really the case. Even though at the core, I think we share some problems, and that is a loss of tradition and a loss of memory in favor of a modern world that has lost respect for what traditions knew. And I think this is something we share, and we will probably be talking about later on. In my, unfortunately, still only German book, Digitale Ethik, I must tell you the story that finding the title wasn't that easy. And now, as I created the first translation into English, I called it True Progress instead of Digital Ethics. And the reason for that is that digital ethics is, for me, a way of life. It's a way of living a progressive life and a good life. And how comes that digital ethics or ethics, for me, has so much to do with a good life? And this is actually not me who has invented that concept. It's the original meaning, and one of the first publications on ethics was Aristotle, who wrote in about 500 before Christ his very important book on Nicomachean ethics. And what his time was obsessed with, and if you've ever, visited Ephesus or other Athens and so on, you still see that that was a great culture to live in. And in antiquity and at his time, they indeed had a concept of progress. They wouldn't use the word progress, but they had a concept of progress. And progress for these societies was about humans progressing, individuals progressing. They were humble enough to understand that at the very core, every human being only has one way to progress through life, and to do that in a good way is to become a better person, to become more knowledgeable, to become more wise, to become more to feel more empathy with the people around you, to be a good person. And in antiquity, these philosophers were convinced that in the end, only if you grow yourself, if you progress in that very individual way, you will live a good life and find something that they called eudaimonia, which we now very simplistically translate as happiness or well-being. So that was progress during that time. And I think that concept of progress has remained in education and in the philosophy of life for a long time, actually until the 13th century. But then in the 13th century, there was a very important break for our modern time. Also a break that had happened in the intellectual world of Western Europe. In fact, the first person ever using the word innovation was a monk called Albertus Magnus. And Albertus Magnus, with that term, introduced a notion that was not really welcome to his world at the time, because his world was marked by values such as tradition, stability, and continuity. So in his time, people were very reluctant to the way of thinking that we have today at the most opposite extreme, that is about exploration, change, and constant disruption. They were more trying to keep everything as it was and very subtly and carefully only do changes. I mean, if you go today to Gothic churches, and we all cry about Notre Dame, go there and you know what that kind of thinking has produced in terms of innovation and beauty. It's amazing, and I hope that the French will be able, with all their innovations and modeling techniques and modern architecture and so on, to come back to this kind of, to recreate and rebuild Notre Dame in such a way. But to go back to Albertus Magnus, so he was embedded in this culture of continuity and stability and tradition, and then he came with this term innovation. But it was actually another person around his lifetime called Roger Bacon, not Francis Bacon, Roger Bacon, who was much more radical and who said, no, it's not only about innovation. We have to experiment with the world. We have to invent new things. And with him, he took this ball, innovation, and he coined it as progress being to invent something new. Yeah? Progress not as a personal concept, but progress as new inventions. And this idea, this was like a spark, it's a small spark of fire, that is something that Europe took up. And it did not remain a philosophical idea. It, in fact, the idea to create progress through innovating something new and through experimenting was extremely successful. And if you look at the centuries after Albertus Magnus and Roger Bacon, you see that so many inventions made Europe extremely rich. Like the gunpowder, which actually was innovated earlier, but now basically taken up, that allowed colonialization, arms were created, that actually allowed us to colonize and to get rich based on colonizing other countries. The printing press was invented, that revolutionized the way we educate people, we think and we share knowledge. The clock was invented, that allowed for a form of life, of industrialization and work that we see today. So basically, starting in the 14th century with this idea of creating something new, innovating, that is progress. We came to cherish a value called newness. Newness. Everything that's new is better. Everything that's old is actually outdated and should be replaced. So basically, when we talk about changing values, this is an important historical milestone to consider. Now, this kind of thinking and also this experience that new innovations make you rich and that change and experimentation works led to, by the 18th century, to a European thinking style, as at least among the elites, that had lost its fear of nature to some extent, and believed that you can control nature through experimentation and through innovation. And if you go to Versailles, to the Park of Versailles, I think architecturally, also looking at the garden architecture of Versailles, is a manifestation of this kind of thinking. where newness and progress culminates in the values of planability, controllability, and power. If you look, and this also shows quite well in the history of how Versailles actually came about. Because Louis XIV, the king, built Versailles in a place which was actually a stinking, muddy place. Nobody wanted to go there. It was full of water and stinking, and actually not the right place to build a castle. But he was convinced that he doesn't need to care about those natural dispositions. He could control it all, and they built this really powerful place. I don't want to say beautiful place, because when you go there and you walk there, after an hour you're so tired because it's so perfectly planned and trocken. I don't know how to say that in English. It's a difficult place, and it costs a lot of money. For example, they have a lot of palm trees in that garden, and they have, if you ever try to carry a palm from inside to outside, how much money and energy that costs to work against nature, to work against water, to work against your climate, yeah. But they didn't care. That idea of planability and controllability of nature was at its cultural height, I would say, during that time. Louis XIV even wrote a manual, and this is very important for our modern time, for our current times as well. He wrote a manual where he would describe how visitors were supposed to walk the gardens. Yeah? Just as we get these manuals today that we have to read carefully in order to know how to work our digital devices. And we are supposed to read them in order to be able to use them. And basically, let's think about this starting in the gardens of Versailles. Now, this development of thinking in Europe until the 18th century was accompanied and is still ongoing in another related avenue of thinking, and that is the rise of scientism and positivism. Now, in earlier times, and I would certainly say until 17th, 18th century in Europe, the science was philosophy. Mainly philosophy. Yeah? And perhaps some people would ask, so what is philosophy? And some would say, oh, modern managers think philosophy is hippo. Wonderful. Made the point. I don't know whether anyone knows what hippo stands for. HIPPO? It stands for highly paid personal opinion. And it is a Silicon Valley acronym to show that people who just have opinions and no facts are actually outdated. And in order to make a point, you always have to make proofs, and you have to have mathematical formulas. And I don't think they like books like Weapons of Math Destruction these days, or Factfulness. So books that show that in fact also scientism and positivism has its limits. But to come back to the grand streams of historic thinking in Europe and in the United States later, the idea of newness, of controllability, and power was sustained and supported by an increasing power of natural science approaches in the sciences. So I call this in my book model-based thinking. If you want to innovate, if you want to construct a machine, yeah, the first thing that you have to do, probably also with architecture, you have to build a model of what this thing looks like, What is it? Is its data input? How does it process the data? And what is the output? Everything needs to be perfectly structured. You have to have a model, and so model-based thinking and the idea that everything in the world can be modeled was a very powerful idea that is still happening these days, as we think in science that at some point we can explain everything. Perhaps there are even scientists still who believe that there could be something like a world formula, a model for everything. I mean, the more wise ones know that that doesn't exist and won't exist, but there are still debated. And then there is a third and final stream of thinking that is extremely important for understanding our current value structure and society. And this is that colonialization has made European elites think that they have the power to develop whole nations. Yeah? They went, you must imagine, these westernizers, with these British or French, they went into, or Germans, they went into those countries and they saw what they thought were wild people, and they went into those countries and they thought they are developing them. They are bringing them a true civilization. And within very short time frames, they were building roads and they're putting up their business there. And within a very short time, they brought them the right faith, religion. And within a very short time frame, they were able to converge those originally wild societies into something that they considered more or less civilized. Now, this experience, this true experience, and this judgment about their own achievements made them believe that humans can be considered as a species or groups that you can develop and shape and make into something that you consider desirable. Yeah? So the break of thinking here that is happening is that from true individualism, we go into a kind of general humanism. Now, they had good intentions for sure, but let me read a little quote from my book, an English translation, where I give you some examples of authors who show this shift in thinking. Increasingly, 18th century philosophers overlooked the fate of individuals or local communities and instead thought in large dimensions, such as the education of the human race, the title of a major work by Gotthold Ephraim Lessing in 1780, or like Condorcet, they reflected on the great revolutions of the human species. Kant recommended for the categorical imperative that one should focus on humanity in myself and in others. So not about myself, but in humanity in myself and in others. And established thinking about universal reason. The naturalist and Jacobin, Johann Georg Forster, described in a guide to a future history of mankind how the local, special, peculiar of human beings should be transformed into universality. We find ourselves on a path where we are, as it were, an idealized people, abstracted from the whole of the human race. As individuals, we are representatives of the whole species. But we are not ourselves again anymore. We are representatives of a modern humanity, whatever that is. And this idea that that there is something called humanity and we simply shape it is a very important concept, because let's relate it to our modern times. In our modern times, where our model-based thinking in terms of controllability of power and of scientificism, where coolness, smoothness, and whiteness is what seem to be predominant values, we also think that since we don't have people in the production lines anymore, and we have no more taxi drivers when there are autonomous cars, and we lose so many jobs, it doesn't matter, because we just shape people and we make them all mathematicians and we make them all computer scientists, and we will now do what the British call STEM and we call MINT, mathematics, informatics, and so on. We will simply put people into school and then they will all come out and they will be able to service the machines. Yeah? This is a little bit the thinking. And this thinking comes from our tradition and this idea that we can shape a humanity and that the values that people feel attracted to do not matter. Now, of course, you realize already in the way I speak that I'm a big critique of this kind of thinking. Because I remember going to school, I don't know how you remember going to school, you had a class of 20 or 30 people. How many were really good in mathematics and liked to do the first computer science courses? Perhaps 5 or 6, maximum 10, but 20, no way. And the thing is, this is because human beings have a natural inclination, feel attracted to doing certain things or certain material of thinking, but not necessarily only mathematics. But this modern idea is that we simply shape things. We simply make the world the way we think it's good for it. And so this is where we are. And when this kind of thinking came together with neoliberal capitalism in the 20th century, this is why we now have efficiency, speed, and profit at the core of our value system. Basically, it's a mingling of modern thinking in terms of models, innovations, newness, planability, controllability, and you put this together in a box called capitalism in an American sense, and this is where you end up. And I think this won't work. I think that that life is much more in the margins. I'm trying to go to a picture here that I feel is one of the most important paintings that tries to unveil the way I think is Paul Klee's a painting on red, green, and violet, yellow rhythms. What Paul Klee shows in this painting for me is that he has this, you know that many of his paintings have these geometric figures, but then you see there are these little trees that are growing out of the formations. So the geometric structure, the total control, he worked at the Bauhaus, yeah, that this modern life is imposing on us, nature doesn't really want it. Yeah? It always finds its way through the small Ritzen, cracks. And now, to go back to my to my story here, modernity, since it believes that it can simply shape humanity, also thinks that the only thing that is needed is actually the creation of needs. Yeah, good marketing. Now today's artificial intelligence systems, for instance, many thought leaders say we have to ensure that people trust artificial intelligence. Let's make sure that people don't fear artificial intelligence. So they say, let's just get rid of the emotion. And this kind of speaking is very much an expression of the idea that you can control these inner emotions, or on the positive side, that you can simply create needs for modern products. Now, I think that that is completely off track. I really think it's completely off track. Even though the IT industry and the capital behind this is extremely powerful, probably the most important power in today's world, what is happening right now is that we observe all over Europe, and also I think to some extent in the United States, we observe that people are unhappy. And it is what they say when they're being asked, what is it that you want? They will tell you a lot of things, like we want more money, we want more social security, we want, more housing support, etc., etc. But this is all, I believe, it's symptoms. I think the true underlying thing that is happening here is that the values of controllability and power and cleanness and coolness and abstraction is not accepted by normal human beings. Sometimes when you talk to these people, they say the elites, the politicians, they don't understand us. What do they mean when they say the politicians don't understand us? I think what they mean is that they don't understand that their life is about completely different values that they are looking for. They are striving to live a life also in companies where they can unfold. I very much liked when you showed the picture of the stove images, how the women take the stove, you showed your model. You gave them the model, and then they could build, what did you say, 1,200 pieces of art. So they would be taking something and then they put their creativity inside and activity and ideas. And these values, this hope of every human being to unfold its creativity into its life, is something that the modern world is taking away from us. Just look at these pictures again. So now, truly, there are robots that are going to cook for us, and the cars are going to drive for us. And already the history of the car shows how we are pushed into passiveness, because people, in Germany at least, they love their cars. So many people would be taking their cars apart on the weekend. So they were opening it, and they were repairing it, and they were cleaning, and they were doing everything with the car. It was like a scene of art, And now, no, you only have software modules. You plug them in, and the very least peak of that is that you don't even drive anymore. So passiveness. And if you go into modern companies, this kind of passive work style has very much found its way into the processes. If you go to an automotive factory, you will find that over 90% of the tasks are automated. People are only there and they're looking at the screens. That's all they do. And so their life has lost its value blood. And this term, value blood, is important because, and I will tell that later to you, values, from my understanding, are a fifth dimension in this world. We don't see them, but it's them who give our life a meaning. So since we cannot really interact in a value-driven way with machines, we end up in a very cold life, and then people do not only turn to the streets, but look at the other angle of what they're interested in. Look at what the big blockbusters are today. And I brought you two of them. One is a series, Game of Thrones, and the other is a blockbuster movie called Avatar. And if you look at those blockbusters, what people love, it's about nobility and humbleness of Jon Snow and courage and loyalty, and then here in Avatar, the tenderness and sustainability and tradition of this avatar, of this creature culture. And this is what people love. And you know what? These are all virtues, and we are back to Aristotle. So what is it that touches on human beings in the Western world today, and that are expressed in hatred as much as in fascination with modern cinema, is the virtues. And I brought you here the list of virtues that Aristotle talks about in his Nicomachean Ethics, since we are a lecture, yeah? So courage, temperance, generosity, high-mindedness, inflatedness, healthy ambition, gentleness, truthfulness, kindness, justice. This is what the old society was about: human progress, virtues. And this is what today's people, I believe, also look for again in a soulless world in the West. And so with this, you have an introduction into my historical and modern understanding of the importance of values. But as in the introduction of my person, you heard is that I'm actually a professor for business informatics. And I'm teaching things like internet economics, system analysis, and I work for IEEE, the largest engineering organization, and in order to bring ethics to them. So in the last 10-15 minutes, I want to share with you a little bit of my work here. Not so much the details, but the challenges. And I would like to therefore start this with another quotation from my book, or a story from my book, that deals with the modern voice assistant software that most of you know. Most of you have an Alexa or Siri or Google Assistant or something like that at home, a voice assistant. And what was very interesting, I found that in 2017, on a Russian website, there was a comparison. They compared the Russian voice assistant, which is called Yandex, and they compared Yandex with the American version Alexa. And they had this example that when somebody would say to the English speaking, to the American Alexa, I am so sad, then the Alexa would say, I wish I had arms to hug you. And the Russian assistant, Yandex, answered to Russian users, nobody said that life is a picnic. And So see, here we have probably on a software level, we have the same kind of machine, yeah, the hardware level for sure. But the the culture, the values that are transmitted through such a system can be very, very different. So at the center of this technology is a value, the value of consolation. In the German, that is Trost. Yeah, Trost. And depending on how the value of consolation is lived, you either promote warmth and love and or strength and discipline. Yeah. So what I want to say with this example is that here actually put some values here that are immediately in the room when you think about this example. So what I want to say is that every single device and software service that we bring into the world is loaded with a lot of values that impact us and our children. Just imagine a child talking to the Alexa regularly in America will be a different child than the one that's talking to the kind of Yandex in Russia. And so I believe and I promote that when we build technology, before we actually build it, at the early stages of innovation, we have to get together with cultural, local stakeholders and try for every big market to understand what are the values that they want to see in the technology, promoted by the technology and supported by the technology and not breached by the technology. So this is my major contribution to early innovation life cycles. Yeah? But I suffer when I see what's going on at the political level. Because this morning even this morning in preparation of this talk, also for my general interest, I read a very recent article just published in Nature on machine intelligence. And what these researchers did is they looked at what kind of values scientists believe we need to have in the technology today. And there are 84 lists and initiatives and global initiatives from IEEE to OECD to the EU Commission, and they all come with their model thinking, their checkbox thinking, and they say, okay, if we have these values in the technology, we are fine. So they say the technology needs to be transparent, it needs to be privacy sensitive, it needs to be secure, and it needs to leave enough autonomy to the people, and for sure it should not be biased. That's it. Now, where is consolation in that? Where are any of the values in there that are relevant just for this little speech assistant? No list of the 84 lists and over 1,000 values that were expressed in them altogether actually scratched the surface of what a simple technology does to households, and a technology that will be very powerfully there. So, my biggest concern is that true ethics, is something very, very different from the kind of check-the-box value list thinking that the current political system believes is good enough to build trustworthy AI or other complex systems. I think that what needs to be done is not only for those political people and the people working in those groups, but actually for any one of us and for education, for the education of our children, we have to bring back an understanding of values into the educational system. And I don't have the time, I think, to go further. I had some slides on what values actually are from a philosophical perspective. I don't want to go into that detail, but my final advice is that we won't get around, first thing, to go deeper than just believing in a few checklists. And the second thing, and this is also the core message of my book, is that it's not the politicians or the scientists who are going to do this for us. They will come up with these 5, 10, 11 value lists, and they will try to put these hygiene factors into technology. But for the rest, we as individuals, we as investors, as managers, as teachers, we have to get more into the value world, and we have to think more about values when we act, when we invest, and when we teach, and when we build and do things. And with this I close, and I have a little video for you in German, unfortunately only. Who does not speak German in this room? So it's 4 or 5 people. But I would like to show this video still. I think you enjoy it because it little bit wraps up the session. I hope so. What? No, I can't do it myself, so you have to do it.
Wenn wir heute über Fortschritt nachdenken, dann gilt für viele moderne Menschen die Idee, dass neu automatisch gleich gut ist, dass digital besser ist und dass das Alte oder Althergebrachte wohl schlechter ist als das Nächste, was da kommt. Ob man dank Schießpulver und neuen Kanonen die Welt eroberte, mit der Druckkunst mehr Information und Bildung schaffen konnte, ob dank Waschmaschine und Elektrizität heute ein sehr viel angenehmeres Leben möglich wird, neu scheint uns immer gleich gut. Aber stimmt das immer noch? Mit der Digitalisierung sitzen viele von uns nur noch vor dem Bildschirm. Oder wir starren und tippen in unsere Smartphones und virtuellen Spielewelten. Viele von uns sind von ihren sozialen Netzwerken so abhängig wie Alkoholiker vom Alkohol. Wir sind wie Fliegen im digitalen Netz, was uns überall umfängt und in dem wir nur noch passiv reagieren und kämpfen, um all den Anforderungen und Nachrichten gerecht zu werden, die auf uns einströmen. Nicht selten erntet man dann auch noch Hass und Neid, wird manipuliert und überwacht. Ist neu im digitalen Zeitalter wirklich dann immer noch automatisch gut? In meinem Buch Digitale Ethik stelle ich die These auf, dass obgleich Digitalisierung ursprünglich gut für uns war und uns Spaß gemacht hat, es mittlerweile ziemlich bergab geht mit unserem Fortschritt. Selbst ehemalige Google- und IBM-Mitarbeiter sprechen heute schon von einem Downgraden der Menschen, von einem Rückschritt statt Fortschritt durch die Digitalisierung heutiger Art. Die Frage ist, könnte es auch anders sein? Könnten wir mit unseren digitalen Diensten Werte schöpfen? Also Digitalisierung so gestalten, dass sie uns Menschen positiv weiterbringt. Wenn wir das wollen, dann müssen wir zunächst die Frage stellen, was Werte eigentlich sind. Wir benutzen diesen Wertebegriff sehr schnell. Freundschaft, Gemeinschaft, Erreichbarkeit, Freiheit, Wissen und auch eine Untergruppe der Werte, die sogenannten Tugenden, sind uns sehr wichtig, etwa Mut, Ehrlichkeit, Loyalität oder Würde. All diese Werte werden von der Digitalisierung fundamental beeinflusst. Daher ist es sehr wichtig, dass wir diesen Prozess sehr genau beobachten und steuern, wenn wir weiterhin ein gutes Leben führen wollen. In meinem Buch Digitale Ethik beschreibe ich 3 Schritte, die jeder Einzelne gehen könnte, um ein wertvolles Leben in einer digitalisierten Zeit zu führen. Erstens, welche Werte sind mir wirklich wichtig? Zweitens, wofür stehen diese Werte eigentlich ganz genau? Und drittens, wie handle ich so, dass ich meinen eigenen Werten gerecht werde? Und diese 3 Fragen stelle ich in meinen unterschiedlichen Rollen. Als Privatperson, als Berufstätiger, als Teil einer Gruppe oder auch als Ingenieur und Entwickler. Nehmen wir ein Beispiel, um diese 3 Fragen näher zu erläutern, aus dem privaten Leben. Stellen wir uns dazu Thomas vor. Thomas stellt sich die Frage, welche Werte ihm besonders wichtig sind. Nach einiger Zeit Nachdenken wird ihm bewusst, dass ihm sowohl seine Freundschaften als auch seine persönliche Freiheit immer schon sehr wichtig waren. Aber was ist denn Freundschaft überhaupt? Und vor allem in unserer heutigen digitalen Welt? Thomas sollte sich fragen, wie kann ich meine Freundschaften so leben, dass ich meine digitalen Medien dafür richtig nutze? Und wie kann ich meine Freiheit behalten, wenn ich digital ständig erreichbar sein muss und reagieren soll? Thomas denkt also tiefer über das Thema Freundschaft nach. Er findet dazu gute Überlegungen bei dem Philosophen Aristoteles, der einmal die Nutzenfreundschaft, die Spaßfreundschaft und die tugendhafte Freundschaft unterschieden hat. Die tugendhafte Freundschaft ist die wertvollste und tiefste, die sich Thomas eigentlich wünscht. Da geht es darum, dass man sich häufig sieht, etwas gemeinsam unternimmt und dabei auch oft tiefe Gespräche führt, die einen persönlich weiterbringt. Mit diesem Verständnis davon, welche Art von Freundschaft er sich eigentlich wünscht, denkt Thomas nun darüber nach, wie er in Zukunft sein Handy und E-Mail im Umgang mit Freunden nutzen will. Weil wissenschaftliche Studien gezeigt haben, dass Gespräche oberflächlicher sind, wenn das Handy im Raum ist, nimmt er sich vor, in Zukunft das Handy in der Tasche zu lassen, wenn er zu seinen engsten Freunden zu Besuch geht. Außerdem nimmt er sich vor, Konflikte nicht mehr per SMS auszutragen, sondern nur noch persönlich. Und drittens nimmt er sich vor, das Thema Erreichbarkeit mit seinen Freunden einmal zu besprechen. Digitale Ethik hat also nichts mit Gesetzen, Regeln oder Moral zu tun, sondern bei digitaler Ethik geht es, wie man am Beispiel Thomas sehen kann, darum, immer wieder zu fragen, wie handle ich eigentlich richtig auf meinem Weg durchs digitalisierte Leben? So, dass ich mit der Gemeinschaft der anderen Menschen, Tiere, der Natur und natürlich auch mit mir selbst richtig umgehe. Und wer ist eigentlich ich? Ich, das bin nicht nur ich privat wie Thomas in seinem Privatleben, sondern ich als Angestellter oder Unternehmer, ich als Ingenieur oder als Investor. Welche Werte will ich in dieser Welt fördern und welche will ich beschützen? All das und noch viel mehr steht in meinem Buch Digitale Ethik, ein Wertesystem für das 21. Jahrhundert. Erschienen im Drömer Verlag in München im April 2019.
Thank you to the two of you for the two truly inspiring keynote lectures. You mentioned the bridge. I'm trying to bridge this discussion with my first question. But before I ask the question, I would like to give you, many of you know the quote, one of my absolutely favorite quotes, because tradition was something you touched on. The quote apparently is by Gustav Mahler, but in reality is more complicated and is by Jean Jaurès. But I give you the less complicated Mahler version of it. And Mahler was a director of the Vienna Court Opera, and of course a great composer, but it relates to his experience at the Court Opera. And Mahler said, tradition is not the adoration of the ashes, but the passing on of the fire. And I think it's just a wonderful quote. And now I come to my question. I remember when I lived in New York for 8 years, one of the exhibitions that really stayed in my mind forever, so to speak, was by Tino Sehgal at the Guggenheim Museum. And as usual with Tino Sehgal, you know there's not much to see, but there are people. And when me and my family walked up the famous ramp at the Guggenheim, after approximately 100 meters, a 10-year-old girl came next to us and asked, "What is progress?" And I don't remember what I answered, but I give the question to you. What is progress? And the additional question is, do we reflect enough about what kind of progress we want? And if not, and I guess we don't, how can we change that?
I probably share, for me, in this antique sense of progress, that I believe that a progressive life is one where you as a person grow to be so fine with yourself that you can live a good life no matter how rich or you are or you know how many friends and likes you have. This internal stability is the peak of I think personal progress. What I do believe, though, is that a life in which you have certain riches, yeah, like flowing water or also electricity, light to read, for example, in my case, a good hygiene system and so on. As some basic riches are, from my perspective, also important for such a progressive society. Certainly not digitalization, but these core technologies of the kind that you presented are important to have as a basis for life in order to have more, so that it's easier to then also give time to yourself and others.
Okay, well, it's a tough question, huh? It's first of all, of course, the country that I come from, where we want progress, definitely. And the progress is very simple for me. As I said, basically making sure that human rights are fulfilled, first of all. And so rights-based development is essential. And as I talked about unmet needs for most of the people, unless everybody has at least a certain level of attainment of quality of life, then progress really does not matter if in some parts of the country some people have got everything. So I think we have to look at the common good of everybody and how we can help to share knowledge with each other, whatever knowledge it is. And for us to think that only maybe a certain kind of knowledge is the only thing that we need, it's not true. Because there can be many different kinds of knowledge, which we talk about intangible kind of knowledge as well, that's important for lifting the human spirit. And I think somehow we have to try to achieve that for everybody. So it should be a level playing field, as technology actually provides. But, and that can actually play a very important part. I think in countries like mine, where we have actually now coverage, the internet coverage, but most people are illiterate, so they can't take advantage of what is there. And a time has to come when we can use technology for the betterment of human and social development. And I'm very keen now in the work that we're doing is to see how we reach out to every woman who's maybe illiterate and may not have anything, but that we should be able to interact with her and to share knowledge about what can be done to improve her life. So I think for me that will be progress when most people will come up from the poverty level and are able to have access to unmet human needs. That for me would be progress.
I would just suggest, actually, because we have quite a long evening already, some people seem to be hungry already, leaving, that we should give you the chance to come forward with your question, because I had already the very exquisite chance this afternoon to have a long chat with Yasmeen. So what would you like to ask Sarah and Yasmeen? Please don't be shy. If not immediately, if you're still waiting, I would like to ask you, Yasmeen, and maybe Sarah could also add to that. We learned from your lecture that, like, if somebody is completely kind of electricized and wants to do something, giving you a donation or charity, that's not what you're looking for. You even rejected the charity of Prince Charles. Like, there are quite a couple of architects, designers, creative people in there, and I think we have a lot of reflection on, yes, we would like to do a different architecture, but we can't find the clients. And of course, architecture and design and all the art is part of the capitalist economy. If you're saying the poor are producing for the poor, what would be or what could be the role of the creative class, let's put it like that, in this game? Is there a role, or is it just like we don't need it anymore?
I think they're very much needed, actually. How many architects are here? Can we see? Okay, not as many as I would have thought and would have liked to have, but anyhow. I think that architects can play a very important role in development of people who are marginalized. Because see, where there are deficits and where there's shortage of any kind of materials or expertise, then design plays a very important part. But there are designers, I'm sure, because it's all art people as well. And where we can expect to improve vernacular traditions, but I think you need a good designer to have the sensitivity to do it in the right way. Because unless it's done in a manner that it becomes relevant to who you are serving, there's no use in doing anything. So as I showed you some of the examples when the international aid-giving agencies come in, they want to impose an alien culture. So if there were more architects in the game, they would be sensitive to the environment and to the context. That's what we are taught, that you must always design for the context. And so I really believe that, especially for young people, I would say, there's a huge open kind of field now, which is about humanitarian architecture or humanitarian assistance. And I think most architects feel that, of course, working for the 1% is always very comfortable because you know that you'll get the fees paid. But on the other hand, I mentioned that UNCTAD has, for instance, calculated you need something like $4 trillion. So there has to be a package for architects in there as well. I mean, $4 trillion cannot just be frittered away. But there are not enough architects in the humanitarian architecture field who can actually take on the thing and say, well, we are here and we'll do it right. So I would really suggest that somehow in our schools of architecture, more and more humanitarian kind of aspects should be taken into consideration. And that may also lead to really making sustainable structures. And we talked about hybrid buildings, so maybe I could mention that, which is that, see, I think the question today is how do we lower the carbon footprint? I mean, everybody doesn't have to do zero carbon, but you can lower the carbon footprint. And that's what architects can do, is to start building hybrid structures where you may have kind of, concrete and steel frames, but inside it could be low carbon finishes or, flooring or partitions or something. So if we can make that our aim, then we start building, lower carbon structures. And I think that would help a long way to save the planet.
Are there any questions at this stage? Thank you very much. I think that was a very important point. Brigitte?
Pakistan has a very diverse climate. Are your buildings fit for all the different climates in Pakistan? Can you use them in the desert, in the mountains? And do you see these buildings as a first step for these people, and then they would move on to higher value, so to speak, buildings? Or is this then the place where they live for the rest of their lives?
Thank you for asking this question, and it's only because you know Pakistan well, so thank you, Excellency. I think that, of course, Pakistan has very varied kind of climates and regions, and you have to design for each one. So when I design for the north, is slightly different in the sense that the materials that we use will be different, but basic materials, the same materials can actually work very well. But somewhere we have more stone, and everywhere we have either extreme climate or very hot or very cold, or and so on. So, and every part of it actually has a different kind of architecture as well, the vernacular architecture. Now, I do believe that they do not have to emulate the urbanites or the Western concepts of architecture. I think we have very rich traditions which need to be now taken up seriously by designers to see how we can further that cause, because they're not only sustainable, they're really, in terms of comfort and the microclimate that they create within the buildings is something exemplary. So if we're looking at all that, I would rather that we go through that same tradition. I would like to introduce, in fact, I want to have a reverse kind of traffic now. So far, everybody has wanted to, in the rural areas, to impose the urban kind of concepts of building. I think we should now reverse the trend. We should bring the rural concepts of how things should be built into urban areas, and I think we'll do much more sustainable and more sort of climate smart cities that we're all looking for. So I would like to take this particular way forward rather than imposing, as I said, steel or concrete or urban kind of alien forms. I think urban forms are very alien for rural areas. So let's reverse that and change how we look at urban centers now. Absolutely.
Can I ask a quick follow-up question? To what extent do we make use of digital tools with your concepts?
Yes, of course. I mean, all our drawings are done through digital means today. We don't, we don't draw them by hand anymore. But I think in the humanitarian field, there's a huge possibility of using digital means, and we must do that. I mean, if you talk of, for instance, warnings for disasters, that is something there. As I said, I'm really keen that all my poor women who can't read or write, I need to have an interaction with them. And I can only do it if, we can see that everybody has a phone and that we are able to convey messages to them. In fact, it would be very good if you could maybe reflect on that and see how can we actually empower, especially women who are left behind in so many ways, through digital means. Could it be electronic teachings? Could it be through audio messages? Could there be any apps that can be used? That would be really interesting for us.
So maybe to clarify that, I think it's also very much about working with digital tools without being able to read. Like that's, of course.
That's the question. That you have all the new tools that really, with voice recognition, etc. So you overcome illiteracy via digital tools.
Yeah, that's what we're talking
about. I think it would be good to, I think when you digitalize in a country where you don't have that technology yet, it's important to not do too much in the end that the pros outweigh the cons. As the pros, certainly, as you say, the possibility, for instance, if you have a facility where you can have remote teaching through teleconferencing, and you could, hook up to your former students, once a month and talk to them and give them new ideas, or you send them documents. What I find, what I see in the Western culture is that once you introduce digital communication through SMS and messaging, it separates people, it destroys communities. It is as making people, it isolates a lot of people. Not everyone. It's a difference. There's a big difference between people who have very strong ties from family members, very good friends, close ties, like is happening in many of those cultures actually. Digitalization is okay because you send messages and you're fine. However, in our Western world, we know from many studies that people who don't have that, who don't have their family around, don't have friends, and they try to make friends through these digital media. They stay at home and they are very they feel the solitude. In the UK, we now have a ministry for solitude. A ministry for solitude. Yeah. And where does it come from? It has nothing to do with digitalization? No, it has a lot to do with digitalization. So what we have to we have to use the benefits, everything we can do to bring this knowledge to people, but to ensure that, or Wikipedia, for instance, descriptions, how to do things, how to build such a thing themselves. But we have to pay attention that we don't, that the disruptive parts of the technology don't destroy more than is gained.
Thank you very much for this really interesting lectures we could hear. I'm an architect, and I would be very interested because the growth of the society, Bevölkerungswachstum I lost the word.
Population.
Population. The growth of population, I'm sure, is also a big problem in Pakistan. So we need more place to house the people, and you showed examples from the rural area, and it was already discussed where you said that you would think it's better to bring the rural concepts into the city, but I think that ground is also a very valuable thing, and we always think that densification, you know, going more up than using too much ground per person is important, because you have, of course, you need to grow for food and trees and everything, so you want to keep as much nature as possible. So you have to climb up into the air, you have to make higher buildings, even high rises. So what do you think about it, and how do you think you could do that with this kind of materials and methods? I mean, you were thinking already of hybrid materials, but what is your position to this problem in the end?
Right. Thank you very much for this question. Well, first of all, I don't believe in high rises for people's living. It's okay for corporate sector. I've done some major buildings which are, you know, very tall, but I would not do it for families, because I always go back to our what we call the medieval towns that we have, which is, and you must have heard about this, which is called something called high density, low rise. And I think that's the sane way of doing things, where a lot of people can be congregated as long as you make sure that vehicular traffic does not overtake everything else. Because what's happening today, we are a lot of times following the American model, which is so wrong, because vehicles and cars are given more importance than human beings. So I think we have to go back to more pedestrian ways and what they call smart cities, where you have to make sure that you have a 24-hour cycle where people don't have to, you know, go away for work, but somewhere there. So we have to change the way that we live. And then everybody will be able to be housed in the areas that we talk about. The other thing is, I have to tell you this, that the bamboo structure has a very low plan footprint. I don't know whether you've seen that or not, because it's only 4-inch diameter, that's all. And you can make at least 2 stories, as you saw, but I think I'm going to design something in 3 stories as well. And I think we can actually achieve very high density of people living as long as we do rational planning. Then you won't have to have skyscrapers for, you know, families living on top of each other, where, I don't know whether you read Jane Jacobs or not, who says that everybody should have eyes on the street. So how do you combat, you know, violence and all kinds of other disruptive elements? So if we are talking of well-being of the people, then we have to think in a different manner. We should not be putting people into high rises, especially not for living, and especially where the people are poor, because then you have really little matchboxes, and it's not worth living in those. So I believe in no-cost open courtyards, whether at any level, and so on and so forth. It's a different way of looking at things. But I think if you're interested, then, you know, maybe you should start designing like that as well. What do you think?
No, but I'm just thinking, like in China, for example, you know, in China, for example, if I think at these huge cities, you know, there's not that much ground, you know. I think that it's a big luxus, you know, luxurious thing to have a lot of ground, actually. And I'm just questioning if in certain areas we are able to keep this luxus, even as of for all the people.
What would you say of trying to improve the lifestyles in rural areas so there's not that much migration to the cities? I mean, that's another way of doing it. And that's a big problem, because we do give nothing to the rural areas, so they are forced to go to their city, where it makes a lot of problems. So the governments have to change their policies. They have to now concentrate on the rural areas where people can just stay where they are. It's better for the families. And again, family planning is another thing that we have to focus on. Why should there be so much population? So there are lots of interconnected kind of things. Yeah,
I totally share your point of view. We pull so much, we push so much money into smart city areas. And instead, we could put the money into improving the mobility into villages. We could put high broadband internet to villages And we could have people, you know, live in the center of the Steiermark, I don't know, and travel into Vienna in 40 minutes time instead of today traveling 2.5 hours. No internet connection.
Livelihoods in the rural areas. Why can't people stay where they are? You know?
Yeah, and these villages are vacant. The houses are falling apart. You buy a beautiful villa for 200,000 euros. You don't even get a hamster place for that in the city of Vienna. Yeah, so it's it's this idea that, again, these political thinkers, they think, oh, you have to urbanize now, and then they have this model about urbanizing and building these smart cities, and what they're building is a place for robots, not for human beings.
So one of the important lessons we have learned is we have to ruralize now, rather than urbanize. There were 2 questions there, or comments.
It's actually not a question for me, it's rather a comment, as you maybe you felt that I actually wanted to say something. There was this topic about China, and I've been to China and I've seen these people brought from rural areas to high-rise buildings, and what actually happens, it's not improving their lives. They actually still live in their lifestyle, but it's around the high buildings, so it's actually not working. So it's actually taking people from their natural environment somewhere else where they don't feel comfortable, and they are not able to adjust just like that. They don't change their lifestyle.
Do you think it's unfair on them, on the people who've been moved? What do you think? Do you think it's a good idea to have them moved, or what was your own impression?
I don't think that's a good idea. I don't think that you should move people from their natural environment. They should decide for their own where they want to live. You may not take people from somewhere and force them to live somewhere else.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Yes. I have a question it can be for both of you, more of about historical context. You mentioned helping the poor, by poor and grassroots movement, basically. And it reminded me Papanek, Viktor Papanek. His efforts almost 40 years ago or something, and also intermediate technology from Schumacher. It was already way before, like more than 40 years ago, and most of these were discussed back then in different contexts. Again, like we should implement technology in these cultures appropriately so that it can be sustainable, and we should respect their own culture and diversity, etc. And after that, all these discussions, capitalism has taken over and globalism has taken over, and here we are again discussing similar things. So what do you think changed this time from then to now, if something changed?
I do think that the work that was done is very valuable, because I think it would focus on elements that are important in terms of learning from tradition and applying it. But see, the problem is this, that nobody has really talked about the unmet needs of the people. What's being done is some things that they felt could be done and will be better, but not necessarily looking at the poverty and the causes of poverty. And here, my problem is very simple. There are hundreds of thousands of people who need what we call the basic, rights, kind of delivery of rights. And this cannot be done from outside. It cannot be done even by us who live in Pakistan or live in the country, but even less so from outside world. Because the problems are such, they're so complex that only those people who are living there can understand. I was explaining today actually to Angelika as well that I had worked in sort of with people who were living in informal settlements for quite a long time, but never understood until I really have become so involved since 2005 that now I know what the problems are. So it takes a long time to even understand. But if we teach them to make products that are to deliver and make up for the unmet needs, then there's a huge market. And what I see now today with our work, that the stuff is selling to people around them. And we have to just spread it now much more. So now with the incubator model, I'm hoping, because we've already seen the results since the last 2 years. So hopefully we do better than Schumacher. At least I hope so. We have to. We have to do that.
Can I raise at this point the kind of opposite problem in the wealthy parts of the world, especially in the global north, which is people buy too much stuff.
Consumption.
Yeah. And it's over mass consumption, and you mentioned the creation of needs, Sarah Spiekermann. How can we, quote, heal, unquote, people from their tendency to buy too much stuff?
You tend to ask these very difficult questions, yeah? In fact, you know, and just have to recount an interesting experiment that they did with mice. So they had actually two control groups, and in one section the mice was in a very dull environment, architecturally, yeah, for a mouse. It was in a very dull environment. Not many things to play with, and basically as what I call driven into passiveness, waiting for the next need, which is as soon as the food came, she was jumping on the food and grew fat. And the other control group was the mice were put into a stable that was really playful. They really enjoyed it. They could get around. Basically, they could self-fulfill in that stable. And what happened is they didn't consume so much. They didn't grow fat. So to answer your question, my dream society would be people go to the villages. They live in a very interesting, nice environment. They have gardens. They look into the green. They have the beautiful, even small houses. They have good communities, and they enjoy life. And you know what? Then they need less of these new stuff and food. They are, because they're happy. That's my.
I think. I don't know. I think it's very difficult to become nostalgic now. I think we shouldn't do that. But because I think what I liked so much about both lectures, that it's about learning from tradition, but it's not about doing it one-to-one, like going back to Rousseau. But what the question you were asking, Christoph, was about like if the global north and let's say the global south, to put it like that, completely different with this question of creating needs and not meeting the basic needs. I think what was really interesting in your lecture, Yasmeen, was you had a lot of figures there in money terms, like that much euro, and you're talking about the market, about the economy, but of course astonishingly, it's an economy which is which has money integrated, but it's going far beyond that. So you have a lot of different things to exchange, mainly knowledge, but you're also using a lot of common goods, which are not costly at all, or even zero cost. But it's this fine balance between a money-based economy, a capitalized economy, and a non-capitalized economy. And I think that's also something we are experimenting with in the so-called global north. And I think this is very interesting to find these new balances. And we talked this afternoon also about the high value of education. I think the most valuable thing you're providing with your work is free education. And if you're looking like in our areas, or if you even look into the US, where education is becoming so expensive, you know, that people really pay for it all their life later on. And I think so, this, like, how do you get education? How do you get access to common goods? How do you share? But also, how do you have a way to earn your living, you know? And I think this is very similar in the North and the South, you know, to find this balance and these new ways of exchange.
But I do think, Angelika, and you know what Christoph said, in the market economy, where everybody is motivated by profit and how much profit you can get out of anything that you do, you're forced to promote those elements which may not be even necessary, but as something that is considered valuable to have. So you keep on increasing the kind of consumption that may not actually be needed, because this is how market economy works. And so the difference between, I think, your world and mine is that most people can't afford it. So that's very lucky. In fact, you know, I have to tell you this story that, you know, for the longest time, I've been talking about my mud and lime, and I've been doing work, but nobody, no international agency ever looked at me because they thought, you know, it was not worth looking because they had all their solutions. And then, lo and behold, suddenly the crunch came. There were disasters and not enough money. And then somebody said, well, there's Yasmeen Lari, let's look at what she's doing. And then suddenly, because there was no money or very little money, IOM said, well, please come and help us. So I'm happy when there's no money coming in, actually speaking. It's very good for us. And then we find our own ways. How do you deliver? That's what we need to do.
I think we take 2 other questions and then we slowly wind up, yeah?
Thank you. My question is to Sarah. You showed the photo of this yellow vests, gelb Westen. Was this just an illustration of conflict, or do you mean that with your theory this could have been avoided? Because now it seems it is beyond the point of no return. Sorry, it's a rather difficult question.
My impression is that modern society has created life conditions that do not correspond to the meaning that we, and to the values, thereby to the values that we actually seek in our lives, like stability, community, locality. These are values that seem uncool for our modern times. Modern elites, you know, they want to go to a skyscraper thing and they have their isolated individual lifestyle and their mobile phones, and this is how they live, and they think that's cool. And they impose, or they create through, for instance, through urbanization, massive urbanization, massive digitalization, they impose a world on other people that are simply not then living a good life anymore. And this has gone on for a long time, and nobody's seeing it. And now they see the riots in the street, and I think it's more than just you know, I'm missing some medical insurance, because actually in France, the social system is one of the best ones in the world, yeah? So it cannot be that. It must be something else. And my hypothesis is that modernity has brought us a lifestyle that is not human-centered. And we need to go back. We need to now embrace models, also in our Western societies, to try to understand what is it that the human soul needs and not what neoliberal capitalism wants to have. Yeah, that is, for me, the greatest challenge of our current times.
Okay, last question. No? It's just a comment. You're free to comment.
It's not a question, it's just a comment. I thank you very much to organizers for having chosen 2 very, very different keynote lecturers, because then we see actually what it means by changing values. And then, you know, I can see that in the case of Yasmeen Lari, she has actually used the values of the people, the values that are most important to make progress in their society. And I really think Sarah Spiekermann-Hoff, because she is actually giving us a new way of looking at things in the digital world, which is absolutely very important at this moment. And therefore, I think changing values is the right name for it. I thank you very much, both of you, and the organizers. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think this was the perfect final remark.
I just thought, thank you for doing the final remarks for us. Yeah. and we hope to see you all again tomorrow at 11 a.m. or a little bit before that to register. We'll also have coffee and everything. So have a nice evening and see you tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you.